Hello everyone. I just want to do a video today that's going to be a little bit general and maybe elementary to some players, but I want everyone to at least give it some sincere thought about what the strategies in the opening phase of the game. If I ask a 1500 or 1600 player, what is the best strategy for playing in the opening? What should I do in the opening to secure a good position? And they will say, without blinking an eye, control the center, of course. Even any 14, 1500, 1700, any 2500 player will say the exact same thing. That's the key to securing a good position. What amazes me is how few of them keep that simple thought in their head when they've reached move 20 or move 30 or move 40. You must realize that controlling the center is not just important for the first 10 moves. It is important for all moves of the game until some decision has been reached as to who won or whether it was a draw. So every move you make and every strategy that you plan should have the center at the forefront. Am I playing in the center? Am I developing my pieces in order to control the center? Because where there's more central control, there's usually more piece mobility. So, for instance, any black response to 1e4 should have some, at least be making an attempt to control the central squares, i.e. e6, preparing d5, which is the French defense. d5, the Scandinavian or the center counter, planning to get rid of white's e-pawn and activate the queen. Also, c6, the Caro-Kann, which plans d5 in the hopes of liberating the light-squared bishop. c5, the famous Sicilian defense, and even d6, the Peerts. Before I go further, I do want to say one thing as regarding openings. And I hope I didn't forget, of course, e5. I really am against lower rated players playing closed, flexible openings like the Peerts. It is an extraordinarily flexible opening and it's very complicated. And I think that at a beginning level you need more concrete play. So I think e5 is a good response. Probably the best response for your first few years of playing. But that being said, all of these openings fight for the center. Any opening that is not the ones that I just chose cannot be considered sound 100% because they are not following the general principles. So after 1e4, black plays g6, that cannot be as good as the other options because it violates the very principle of the opening. b6 cannot be sound. Knight c6, I'll give some leeway on that one. I still think it's not sound because d4 comes in and black really doesn't know for certain that he wants the knight on c6. So almost any other reply is going to be bad. So for instance, I want to give now with that in mind, I do have a point why I'm talking about this. Because once your mind is constantly focused on the center of the board, you then can start to really think about what types of actions in terms of strategy are appropriate and which are not. In an open game, one that may stem from e5 or the Roy Lopez or the Sicilian, and many lines of the Sicilian can be quite open, even though it's not considered an open game. You should be cautious at throwing your kingside pawns forward in an attempt to attack the enemy king. In closed positions, that should be the first thought in your mind. So I hope to give you some examples here, and I want to start with the King's Indian defense, which I've never done a video on. Maybe if someone wants me to, I might do some videos on this opening, but I'm really trying to teach understanding right now. So black's main idea here is to allow white to gain this enormous center, in which case, and of course I just said g6 after e4 was bad, but this is different. Okay, e4 was played later, so black plays d6 in order to discourage e5, which would not be anything to worry about. So I'm not going to really discuss this opening right now. I just want to get to the crucial point. While the position remains fluid, black cannot really hope to play on the king side for an attack because white has so much central control. So what should you be thinking as a King's Indian player? You should be thinking, I want to lock down the center. So they play e5. White castles, waiting to see what black does, because the white side knows, okay, black wants the center closed. And after knight c6, black really forces the matter. And once the center is closed, then and only then can wing activity really begin. Now white is going to play on the queen side because its pawn chain is clearly pointing towards the queen side, which is a nice general rule. Wherever your pawn chain is pointing is probably a good place for you to play. And black's pawn chain is pointing towards the king side. So white knows what black's up to, and he's going to get out of the way and play f3. And black gets on with the business, and as you can see, this is a main line. And we can stop here and say black is going to play for king side play, white plays for queen side, and really whoever, if white doesn't get checkmated, white wins, otherwise black wins. So why am I saying this? Because even though that's a very common opening and most players are rolling their eyes right now saying, oh, well, everybody knows that about the King's Indian. Yes, but that rule is so often forgotten. 1,800 players. I walk past their games at a tournament and look at them, look at what's happening. And the board, the center of the board is wide open. And they're throwing pawns in front of their king, playing totally on the wings. And since their opponent is equally as unexperienced, they're responding to the attacks on the wings by attacks on the wings, which violates the fundamental principle. If your opponent is attacking you on the wing and the center is not closed and is not solidified, and there's play in the center, you must play there. So let me give some more examples here. E6, another example will be coming from the Steinitz, which you can review that video. I don't want to go through it. And we can say that right away, since the black center is locked and white cannot play f5 anytime soon, white's going to be playing on the queen side, black's playing on the queen side, white on the king side. So there should be no moves by black right now or anytime soon on the king side. You do not make pawn moves where you're weaker. Write that one down, because it's just going to be not only a waste of time, but it's probably going to make your opponent's job easier. So if you're playing this position, immediately you should look for queenside play and or central play. Okay, so let's go back. Maybe another example. I hope you find this instructive. I know it's general, but a lot of times you need to really go back to the basics if you're going to get out of your standard rut. Because when you memorize these openings, and I don't know if I said this before, but every year or two you need to change your opening, your main response to e4, until you reach some sort of higher level. Because when you play the same opening over and over again, you get into a psychological rut where you're just in autopilot. And since it's like a familiarity zone for you, your opening that you understand so well, it inhibits your creative growth. I firmly believe that. As a musician, and I've been a musician for almost 15 years, you have to constantly push yourself out of your same old, run-of-the-mill, I'll call it a repertoire of songs and or a technical skill. So a classical musician should enrich their playing with jazz or reggae or any other style of music, Western classical, music to give them some sort of different flair to their playing. A classical musician who's exposed to more and more classical music will only be able to play that. And that may be fine. But in chess, we can't be so one-dimensional. So if you're only good at playing open positions, you're bound to get a closed position no matter what type of openings you play. So that's why it's good to switch openings around, not rely on memorization, not rely on what the opening book tells you, or especially what the computer evaluation of a position tells you. Because if you follow the engine on a world championship match, you'll realize very quickly that humans and computers have a lot of disagreements about how to play certain positions. So, are there any exceptions to this rule with playing in the center versus playing on the wings? Can I ever play on the wings when the center isn't clarified? When it's not clear what will happen in the center? And the answer is yes. And it usually happens in openings like the Sicilian. And I'll give you just the, typical example from the Najdorf Sicilian, the English attack, where black plays e6, and it doesn't really matter what black does, whether it's e6 or e5, the same type of thing's going to happen. And black plays b5 right away, which is a wing move, and the center hasn't been clarified, but it's for a logical reason. A lot of times the bishop wants to go to b7. And here white plays queen d2, knight d7. Black's just keeping his options open. Maybe the knight wants to go to c5, who knows? And white plays g4. Now this is bizarre to an unexperienced player because it violates the principles. But in reality, after the next couple of moves, you realize that not really. Now when the opposite side castling happens, you should be looking for pawn storm. Lock down the center, or keep whoever has central control has the better chances of the pawn storm working for them, because they don't have to worry about a counterattack in the center, which when the center collapses, the center is in the middle of the board. That means the pieces that get there can get to any other place of the board much quicker than if they're over on the other side. So in this case, here is one exception, and there are many clever quizzical examples that you can come up with where a wing attack is the best option when, even though the center's falling apart. But as a general rule, we have to follow some principles, even though there are exceptions. So the exception here is you should only be looking for like a hardcore wing attack when there's opposite side castling, or there's a locked pawn center, or the pawn center may not be locked, it may be somewhat open, the center of the board, but you have total control of the center, or a majority of the control, in which you have no fear of a counterattack there. If any one of those three conditions are not met, you cannot play on the wing. You have to play in the center to improve your central position before you try to attack the enemy king. Okay? It's like trying to write a novel without learning how to spell. It's not going to work very well unless you have an editor. And unfortunately, we can't have an editor when we're playing a game. That would be nice. So, that's what I'd like to say about this is a very simple concept about how to play in the opening. And if your opponent plays a move like g6, you should respond classically and play d4 and take the center, hold on to it, and play for central control. You should not respond by playing some wing move or some obscure move, because then your opponent got exactly what he wanted. He wants you to throw you off. They like you to believe when they play openings like this that they want you to build up the strong center and attack it, but I don't think so, because proper play, and this has been played by grandmasters, but so has every other move, and their hope is that the grandmaster will go astray. So that's what I want to say about central control being the first lesson. I'm going to try to do a few videos that are, this is more general. I understand that. It's not something that I can give you a concrete. I can give you tons of concrete examples actually, but I don't have the time in my schedule to work up many games to explain these principles. What you can do is put in your positions from openings you play and really think about, why is the player doing this, why are they doing this, blah blah blah. Everything should be logical. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think.